James Okafor was fairly certain the blinking red light on his console shouldn't be blinking. It definitely shouldn't be that shade of red. Rafe. He called toward the cockpit of the Wayfarer, a cargo hauler that had seen better decades. Tell me that's the coffee machine again? I wish it was the coffee machine, Rafe Delacroix's voice carried back, pitched higher than usual. Navigation's having a seizure. I'm getting readings from, James, I don't even know what this frequency is. It's not on any of our charts. James unbuckled and drifted forward, magnetic boots clicking against the deck plating he'd personally repaired 17 times. The Wayfarer wasn't much, but she was his not much. Through the viewport, Threshold Station hung in the distance like a massive, glittering dandelion. 47 different architectural styles bolted together in a structure that somehow worked despite violating every aesthetic principle in the galaxy. Did you try turning it off and on again? That was my first move. Rafe's fingers danced across the holographic interface, his dark skin glistening with nervous sweat. The system's broadcasting something. I can't shut it down. Broadcasting what? A distress call, I think. Except it's going out on this weird channel that keeps making the translator spit out warnings I've never seen before. Something about ancient reservation, and forbidden frequency, and, oh God, James, I think I just called someone we really shouldn't have called. Before James could respond, every screen in the cockpit went dark. Then, slowly, they illuminated again, not with their usual interface, but with a single line of text that appeared in perfectly rendered English. Why did you call us? James and Rafe stared at the words. The text didn't feel typed or displayed. It felt present, as though it had always been there and they were only now noticing it. Ah, James said, which he'd admit later wasn't his finest moment of first contact. He cleared his throat and leaned toward the comm. Listen, really sorry about this. My co-pilot here, great guy, just a little nervous, accidentally hit something he shouldn't have. We're just a cargo ship. Human vessel Wayfarer, registration number. We know what you are. We asked why you called. The words replaced the previous message instantaneously. James glanced at Rafe, who had gone from nervous to absolutely petrified, his hands frozen above the controls. Honestly? Complete accident. Navigation glitch. We were trying to reach Threshold Station traffic control, and instead we got you. Whoever you are. Again, really sorry to bother you. We'll just be on our way if you don't know who we are. It wasn't a question. James felt a strange sensation, like the ship itself was being observed, understood, catalogued. Not hostile exactly, but thorough in a way that made him acutely aware of the coffee stain on his shirt. Not specifically, no. Should I? For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, how refreshing. Tell us about your species, human James Okafor. How do you? Never mind. James ran a hand over his close-cropped hair. This was surreal, but he'd learned in his years hauling cargo through weird parts of space that surreal was just another Tuesday. What do you want to know? Everything. But begin with what you think is important. James settled into his chair. Rafe was making small, panicked hand gestures that probably meant, don't antagonize the mysterious entity. But James had never been particularly good at reading social cues. Well, we're pretty new to the whole galactic community thing. Only been out here a couple 100 years. We're from Earth, decent planet, bit crowded, too much water according to the Silix merchants who keep trying to buy it. Continue. I guess you'd say we're adaptable? Good at figuring things out as we go. We build things that break, then we fix them. We argue a lot, but we're mostly trying to be decent about it. We've got this weird thing where we adopt random animals as pets, and we put salt on everything, and we make art about literally anything even when it serves no survival purpose whatsoever. He paused. Is this the kind of information you're looking for, or? Yes. More. So James talked. He told them about Earth's oceans and mountains, about human music and the inexplicable popularity of cooking shows, about how humans couldn't agree on anything except that everyone else's recipe for any given dish was wrong. He talked until Rafe's panic had turned to confusion, and he only stopped when the entity, because he was starting to think of it as an entity, asked, "Do your kind often speak to strangers this way?" "What way?" "Without fear. Without agenda. As though we were simply conversing." "Well, yeah. I mean, you seem friendly enough. You haven't blown us up, or anything." An interesting metric for friendliness. Was that humor? James smiled. "You'd be surprised how well it works." "We wouldn't." A pause. "We would like to continue this conversation. Are you approaching Threshold Station? Should be docking in about 3 hours. Then we will meet you there. We find you interesting, James Okafor." The screens returned to normal. Rafe slowly swiveled his chair, his expression somewhere between terror and disbelief. James, do you have any idea what you just did?" "Had a conversation?" "With them. Them. The forbidden frequency, James? That's the Ascend Ari channel. The Ascend Ari. Species so powerful that everyone else just doesn't call them. And you just invited them for coffee." "I didn't invite anyone for coffee. They invited themselves to. They never accept invitations." Rafe was clutching his harness straps. "I took Xenohistory 101. The Ascend Ari withdrew from galactic civilization 10,000 years ago. 10,000 years. Hundreds of species have tried to make contact since. They ignore everyone. They're reality warpers, James. They exist partially outside normal spacetime. They could. Okay, but they seemed nice." Rafe stared at him. Then he started laughing, a slightly unhinged sound. "We're going to start an interstellar incident because you think eldritch space gods seem nice." Threshold Station's docking control took 45 minutes to grant them clearance, which James thought was excessive until they actually docked and found themselves surrounded by 12 different species security forces, all pointing various weapons at the Wayfarer's hatch. "This seems like an overreaction," James said through the external comm. A figure stepped forward. Threshold's administrator. A Valian with 6 eyes and an expression of pure terror spread across all of them. "James Okafor. Rafe Delacroix. You will come with us immediately. You will not resist. You will not speak to anyone. You will." The administrator stopped. Every light on the station dimmed. Then, in the center of the docking bay, space began to fold. James had seen alien technology before. He'd hauled quantum drives and witnessed ships entering frameshift. This was nothing like that. This was reality deciding it wanted to be different for a moment, just to see how it felt. When the folding stopped, something stood in the bay. James's brain struggled to process it. Geometric shapes that existed in too many dimensions. Colors that didn't have names. A form that seemed to shift every time he tried to focus on it, settling into something vaguely humanoid but not quite, like a statue carved from crystallized starlight. Every alien in the bay had dropped to the ground. The administrator was making a high-pitched keening sound. "James Okafor." The voice came from everywhere and nowhere. "You mentioned you were docking. We thought we would greet you personally." James, still standing in the Wayfarer's hatchway, raised a hand in a small wave. "Hey, that's really thoughtful of you. Thanks." The entity tilted its head, or what James's brain interpreted as a head. The others seemed distressed. "Have we caused offense?" "I think they're just surprised. This is apparently a big deal." "Is it?" The entity looked around the bay, and James could have sworn it radiated confusion. We simply wished to continue our conversation. Then let's continue it. James walked down the ramp, stepping carefully over a prostrate insectoid security officer. Behind him, Rafe made a strangled sound but followed. I'm James, obviously. This is Rafe. And you are? Witness of the depth. Though you may call us Depth, if it's easier. Depth it is. Nice to meet you properly. James stuck out his hand, a purely human gesture. For a moment, Depth just looked at it. Then a portion of their form extended, touched James's hand, and the sensation was like shaking hands with the concept of gentleness. Would you like a tour of the ship? She's nothing special, but I'm pretty proud of the work I've done on her. We would be delighted. As James led an entity of cosmic power back toward his aging cargo hauler, he heard the administrator frantically coming someone. Get me Earth's diplomatic corps. Get me the Galactic Assembly. Get me anyone who knows what to do when a human makes friends with the Ascend Ari. Ambassador Hiroshi Tanaka materialized via hologram in the Wayfarer's cargo hold approximately 20 minutes after the universe tilted sideways. James had just finished showing Depth the jury-rigged coolant system he'd built from spare parts and optimism. Captain Okafor. Tanaka's voice was carefully controlled, the tone of a man who had diplomatically navigated 3 trade wars and wasn't about to lose his composure now. I'm going to be coaching you through this situation. Whatever you do, just remain calm, be respectful, and for the love of God, don't promise them anything. James glanced at where Depth was examining a handwritten maintenance log he'd left on a workbench, their form shifting to something that could approximate reading. I think we're doing okay so far. You think. James, do you understand what you've done? No species has successfully contacted the Ascendari in 10 millennia. Wars have been fought over that privilege. Entire civilizations have spent centuries crafting the perfect message. And you accidentally dialed them and invited them to see your cargo hold. They seem interested in the cargo hold. Your maintenance philosophy is fascinating, Depth interjected, somehow hearing a hologram that wasn't even in the same room. You build systems with intentional redundancies and repair accessibility. Most species optimize for efficiency. You optimize for resilience? Personality. Bit of both, James said. Something breaks out here, you can't exactly call a mechanic. So I build things I can fix myself. Plus, I don't know, makes the ship feel more like home when you've personally rebuilt half of it. Charming. Charming. Tanaka's composure cracked slightly. The Ascendari just called human engineering charming. James, I need you to listen very carefully. The Galactic Assembly is convening an emergency session. In about 6 hours, you're going to be the most important human being in the galaxy. Everything you say and do right now is galactic politics. James sighed. Ambassador, respectfully, can we not make this weird? Depth and I are just talking. Indeed. Why is everyone being so formal about this? Tanaka pinched the bridge of his nose. Because, witness of the Depth, your species hasn't engaged with galactic civilization since the Brevix dynasty was founded. Your withdrawal shaped the entire political landscape of known space. Your power is legendary. Species fear you. Others worship you. And now you're touring a cargo hauler. How exhausting that sounds, Depth said quietly. To be reduced to power and politics. Tell us, Ambassador Tanaka, when was the last time someone simply asked you about your day without wanting something in return? Tanaka opened his mouth. Closed it. That's not relevant. Isn't it? Depth has a point, James said. Everyone's so focused on what this means that nobody's just talking. Depth, you mentioned you've been watching the galaxy for 10,000 years. What's that like? Do you get bored? And just like that, they were back to conversation. Tanaka remained on the hologram, occasionally interjecting diplomatic advice that James mostly ignored, while Depth described what it was like to experience time non-linearly and how they developed an appreciation for mortal art specifically because it was finite. Interesting, James said. So you like things because they end? We like things because they matter enough to their creators to make them anyway. Your species builds monuments knowing they'll crumble. Creates art knowing it's temporary. Loves, knowing it will hurt. There's a bravery in that. Most ancient species lose that. They become careful. Sounds lonely. It was. Depth's form seemed to pulse. Was. Past tense. This has been the most engaging conversation we've had in 3,000 years. James smiled. Glad I could help. Though I should probably warn you, hanging around us might get complicated. Sounds like everyone's got opinions about you talking to humans. Let them have opinions. We have missed this. From the hologram, Tanaka's expression shifted from panic to something more thoughtful. James, how would you feel about hosting a formal dinner? With Depth as guest of honor. Give the assembly a chance to observe this interaction in a controlled setting. That sounds like it's going to be full of protocol and rules. Almost certainly. James looked at Depth. What do you think? Want to suffer through diplomatic nonsense together? If you're there to mock it quietly with us, yes. Deal. Tanaka allowed himself a small smile. I'll make arrangements. James, you might have just bought humanity a seat at a very important table. I just made a friend, Ambassador. Yes, Tanaka said. That's precisely what I mean. The dinner was held in Threshold Station's Grand Assembly Hall, a vast space with environmental controls for 40 different atmospheres. James arrived wearing his least stained jacket and immediately regretted it. Everyone else was dressed in formal diplomatic regalia that probably cost more than his ship. You look uncomfortable, Depth observed, materializing beside him. I'm starting to think I'm underdressed for making galactic history. You're dressed like yourself. That's what we appreciate. The hall was arranged with a central table and concentric rings of observation galleries. James counted representatives from at least 30 species, all watching him like he was a bomb that might detonate. At the head table, Ambassador Tanaka sat beside a figure James recognized from news broadcasts, Chancellor Brevix of the Galactic Assembly, an insectoid being whose chitinous plating was decorated with rank insignias. Captain Okafor. Brevix's translator rendered his clicking speech in flat, formal tones. On behalf of the Assembly, we welcome you and honored witness of the Depth to these proceedings. Thanks. Nice place. Brevix's antennae twitched. This dinner serves multiple purposes. First, to formally acknowledge the unprecedented contact between humanity and the Ascendari. Second, to establish parameters for. We're just having dinner, right? James interrupted. Because if this is a negotiation, I should probably mention I'm a cargo hauler, not a politician. He's correct, Depth said. We accepted an invitation to dine, not to negotiate. Though we're curious about this food-sharing ritual. Our species abandoned physical consumption millennia ago, but we have adapted a portion of our consciousness to experience it. A server, a nervous Pilthian youth, approached with the first course. James took his plate and froze. It was some kind of crystalline arrangement that probably violated 3 laws of physics. He had no idea how to eat it. Depth, any advice on this? None whatsoever. We're as confused as you. Well, when in doubt. James picked up what might have been a utensil and attempted to break off a piece of the crystalline structure. It immediately dissolved into a fragrant mist. Okay, that's new. Fascinating. Do all your meals evaporate? Just the fancy ones. James grinned. Want to know what human food is actually like? I've got protein bars on my ship that taste like cardboard and nostalgia. We would enjoy that comparison. Across the table, Chancellor Brevix was making a sound like grinding gears. This is not. We've prepared a 17-course meal following Ascend-Ari traditional protocols from historical records. We had no traditional protocols, Depth said. That's precisely why we stopped engaging. Everyone was so concerned with doing things correctly that no one was actually doing anything. The dinner devolved from there in the best possible way. James told stories about cargo mishaps. Depth described witnessing the birth of a star. James asked inappropriate questions about Ascend-Ari anatomy, or lack thereof. Depth asked about human mating rituals, which James deflected with the grace of someone who absolutely did not want to explain Tinder to a cosmic entity. By the third course, other species at nearby tables were leaning in, listening. By the seventh, the formal atmosphere had cracked entirely. A Valian merchant asked Depth about historical trade routes. A young Corthan diplomat shyly asked James about Earth's oceans. Only Chancellor Brevix remained stiff, conferring quietly with his advisors. During a lull, Brevix spoke up. Witness of the Depth, if I may ask a direct question? Please. Your species has rejected contact for 10,000 years. Hundreds of civilizations have attempted to reach you, using every form of protocol, every cultural bridge, every technological marvel. Why now? Why humans? The hall went silent. Every being present leaned forward. Depth was quiet for a long moment. Because James Okafor asked us about our day. That's not an answer. It's the only answer that matters. Every other species that contacted us wanted something. Protection. Technology. Validation. Alliance. James wanted to know if we ever got bored. He shared his maintenance logs. He treated us like someone he'd met at a station bar, not like a tool to be acquired. Your galaxy has forgotten something important. Beings, any beings, simply want to be treated as beings. Not as power to be leveraged. Not as threats to be managed. James didn't see us as the Ascend-Ari, mythical and mighty. He saw us as someone worth talking to. Depth's form shifted, and for a moment, James could have sworn they looked directly at Brevix. That hasn't happened in a very, very long time. The Chancellor's antennae flattened against his head. But surely humanity plans to leverage this relationship? To request technology transfers? Protection. An alliance that would shift the entire balance of galactic power. James set down his utensil. See, that's the problem right there. I'm sitting here having dinner with someone I find interesting, and you're all turning it into a transaction. Depth, do you want to give me advanced technology? Not particularly. You wouldn't appreciate it. You enjoy fixing things yourself. There you go. Chancellor, I'm not leveraging anything. I made a friend. That's the whole story. That's not possible. Relationships between species are always built on mutual benefit, strategic advantage, carefully balanced. Or, James interrupted, and hear me out here, maybe they're built on actually giving a damn about each other. Wild concept, I know. The hall erupted. Species began arguing in dozens of languages. Brevix was chittering frantically at his advisors. Ambassador Tanaka had his head in his hands, though James could see he was smiling. Depth leaned closer to James, at least, their forms suggested proximity. You're causing chaos. Sorry about that. Don't be. It's delightful. We had forgotten how entertaining honesty could be. The Emergency Galactic Assembly session was held 3 days later, and James was required to attend. He sat in the human delegation section, flanked by Ambassador Tanaka and Dr. Elias Curry, a xenolinguist who had spent the entire shuttle ride briefing James on proper assembly procedure. "You need to be careful," Curry warned. "Every word will be analyzed. Every gesture matters. So, business as usual?" "James, this is serious. The assembly is fractured. Half see your friendship with the Ascendari as humanity's ticket to prominence. The other half see it as a destabilizing threat. If you misstep, then I misstep. Depth likes me anyway." Curry looked like he wanted to argue, but Tanaka put a hand on his shoulder. "Let him be himself, Elias. It's worked so far." The assembly chamber was designed to inspire awe, a perfect sphere where delegations hovered in gravity fields, all facing the central podium. As James entered, he felt thousands of eyes on him. Some curious, some hostile, many afraid. Chancellor Brevix called the session to order. "We convene to address the matter of human Ascendari contact. This assembly has maintained galactic stability for 8,000 years. That stability is now threatened by unprecedented circumstances." A reptilian delegate James didn't recognize slithered forward. "The humans have gained an unfair advantage. Their connection to the Ascendari must be shared equally among all species, or they must be expelled from the assembly. We demand technology transfers. No, we demand the humans cease all contact. This is a violation of the non-aggression accords." The chamber descended into chaos. Accusations flew. Threats were made. James watched species that had cooperated for centuries turn on each other, all because he'd had a conversation. A smooth voice cut through the din. "Perhaps we're approaching this wrong." A being James recognized as Lethix, a merchant prince from the outer reaches, had taken the floor. "The humans clearly possess some strategy we don't understand. Some technique for engaging the Ascendari. Captain Okafor, surely you'd be willing to share your methods? For appropriate compensation, of course." "It's not a method. I just talked to them. Come now." Lethix's smile was sharp. "Everyone wants something. Name your price. Exclusive trade rights? Territory? We can make humanity very wealthy and very powerful. All you need to do is help us replicate your success." James felt suddenly tired. Tired of the politics. Tired of everyone treating depth like a commodity. Tired of being in a room where nobody seemed to understand the basic concept of friendship. "You can't replicate it," he said quietly. "That's the point." Depth didn't respond to a strategy. They responded to someone who wasn't using one. "Nonsense. There's always a strategy." "Yeah. What's your strategy for making friends, Lethix? Do you calculate the optimal conversation topics? Measure the transaction value of every smile? Figure out exactly what someone can do for you before you decide if they're worth knowing? That's simply how relationships work at this level." "No." James stood, and the chamber quieted. "That's how you work. And maybe that's why, in 10,000 years, nobody made friends with the Ascendari. You can't make friends if you're only thinking about what you can get. You can't build genuine connections if every interaction is a negotiation." Depth withdrew because they were exhausted by exactly this. Everyone treating them like a tool, a weapon, a resource to be exploited. He looked around the chamber. "I didn't do anything special. I didn't have a plan. I just treated them like I'd treat anyone, with basic respect, genuine curiosity, and the understanding that they're a person, not an opportunity. That's it. That's the whole secret. And if you can't understand that, then you're never going to have what I have with them, no matter how hard you try to systematize it." The silence that followed was profound. Then space folded, and depth manifested in the center of the chamber. Delegates gasped. Some fled. Most froze. "James speaks truth," Depth said. their voice filling the sphere. We have listened to your debates. We have heard your accusations and proposals. You wish to know our intentions regarding humanity? Every being waited. We have none. No alliance. No technology transfer. No military pact. We simply find them interesting. We enjoy their company. We will continue to engage with them because we wish to, not because it serves any agenda. 10,000 years ago, we withdrew because we were tired. Tired of being courted for our power. Tired of endless diplomatic overtures that saw us as means to ends. Every species that contacted us wanted the same thing, advantage over their rivals. Not one simply wanted to know us. Until James Okafor asked if we ever got bored. Depth's form shifted toward brevics. You fear what this means for galactic stability. You fear humanity will weaponize our friendship. You fear the balance of power will shift. These fears tell us everything we need to know about how little has changed in our absence. We will not be returning to galactic politics. But we will watch humanity's progress with interest. Not because of any grand potential, though they have that. But because they reminded us of something we had forgotten, the simple pleasure of genuine connection. That is our declaration. Make of it what you will. And then Depth was gone, leaving only James standing in a chamber of thousands. Chancellor Brevix was the first to speak. You manipulated them. Some human deception, some psychological technique that... Oh, for the love of... James threw up his hands. Listen to yourself. You just heard them explain exactly why they like humans, and your first instinct is to accuse us of trickery. Because you literally cannot comprehend that someone might engage without ulterior motives. That's not how interstellar relationships function. Then maybe that's the problem. James was shouting now, all his frustration pouring out. Maybe the reason your galaxy is so exhausting is because you've forgotten how to just be people. Everyone's so busy calculating advantage and managing alliances that nobody just connects anymore. I don't want Ascend-Ari technology. I don't want protection. I don't want to be humanity's ticket to galactic dominance. I just met someone interesting, and we had good conversations, and that's it. That's the whole story. And if that breaks your political system, maybe your political system was already broken. He sat down heavily. The chamber was silent. Then, unexpectedly, a small delegate from a species James didn't recognize began to laugh. Then another joined. Then more. It spread through the chamber like a wave, not mocking laughter, but the laughter of beings who had just realized how absurd they'd all been. Ambassador Tanaka stood. The human delegation proposes we table all discussions of Ascend-Ari relations indefinitely. We cannot regulate friendship. We cannot legislate genuine connection. The Assembly's time would be better spent examining why we've built a civilization where such things seem impossible. The proposal passed, if only because nobody had a better idea. 3 weeks later, James was back aboard the Wayfarer, running cargo to a mining colony on the rim. Everything and nothing had changed. The galaxy was still arguing about what humanity's friendship with the Ascend-Ari meant. Chancellor Brevix's coalition had collapsed, replaced by 3 new coalitions all with different opinions. Some species had started sending ambassadors to Earth, hoping to learn the secret of human diplomacy. James had tried to explain there was no secret, but nobody seemed to believe him. Incoming transmission, Rafe called from the cockpit. It's them. Hello, James. Depth's presence filled the comm channel like a familiar warmth. We hope we're not interrupting. Never. What's up? We've been thinking about your concept of hobbies. Activities pursued purely for enjoyment, with no practical purpose. We find this fascinating and wish to understand it better. Would you explain human hobbies? And just like that, James spent the next hour telling a cosmic entity about everything from stamp collecting to extreme ironing. Depth asked questions. James made jokes. Rafe occasionally interjected with examples from his own model shipbuilding hobby. It was, by any objective measure, an ordinary conversation. Which was precisely why it mattered. 6 months later, a young human diplomat named Sarah Chen stood in James's cargo bay, notebook in hand. "Captain Okafor, I've been assigned to the new Cultural Exchange Corps. Ambassador Tanaka said you could help me understand Ascend-Ari relations." "There's not much to understand. But there must be techniques, approaches, cultural bridges." "Nope. Just honesty and basic decency." Sarah's face fell. "That's it? But I've studied xenodiplomacy for years. I know 73 different greeting protocols. I've memorized the social hierarchies of 40 species. I was hoping for something more complex." James smiled. "Want to know the real secret?" "Yes. All that study, that protocol, it's not useless. But it works best when you remember you're using it to connect with people, not to manipulate them. Depth doesn't care about greeting protocols. They care about whether you're genuinely interested in who they are." "That seems too simple. Most important things are." James handed her a data pad. "Here. These are the conversation logs from my talks with Depth. Read them. You'll notice there's no magic formula. Just two beings learning about each other because they want to." Sarah took the pad hesitantly. "And this will help me succeed?" If you think of it as a path to success, you've already missed the point. But if you read them and think, "I'd like to have conversations like that," then you'll do fine. After Sarah left, Depth manifested beside James. "You're becoming quite the mentor. Someone has to make sure the next generation doesn't complicate things." "Impossible. Complications are inevitable. But perhaps, with your influence, they'll be good complications. The kind that come from growth rather than fear." "Speaking of growth," James said, "I've been thinking about that thing you said. About watching humanity because we might become genuine equals. What did you mean?" Depth was quiet for a moment. "In a million years of existence, we've seen countless species rise and fall. Most follow predictable patterns: expansion, consolidation, stagnation. They reach a point where they stop growing because growth requires change, and change is uncomfortable. Humanity is still young enough to be comfortable with discomfort. You build systems meant to be repaired. You create art knowing it's temporary. You befriend beings you don't fully understand. These traits suggest you might avoid the trap that caught every other species, the belief that you've figured everything out. We don't want proxies or clients. We want colleagues. Beings who can engage with us as peers, not supplicants. Humanity has that potential, if you don't lose what makes you human in the process of becoming powerful." "No pressure, then." "None whatsoever. We're immortal. We can wait." James laughed. Then, more seriously, "Depth, can I ask you something? Do you get lonely? I mean, really lonely? 10,000 years is a long time." "Yes. Simple. Honest. We missed this more than we allowed ourselves to acknowledge. Thank you, James Okafor, for answering a call you didn't mean to make." "Thank you for answering." They sat in comfortable silence, a human cargo hauler and an entity of cosmic power, sharing a moment that meant nothing to galactic politics and everything to the two of them. Outside the viewport, stars wheeled in their ancient dance, and somewhere in the vast machinery of the galaxy, the balance of power continued to shift and settle. Species negotiated. Alliances formed and crumbled. The great game of interstellar politics ground on. But aboard the Wayfarer, James Okafor had done something no amount of strategy or protocol had achieved in 10,000 years. he'd made a friend. And in a universe that had forgotten how to make friends, that simple act echoed across the stars, a reminder that the most powerful force in the galaxy wasn't technology, or weapons, or ancient cosmic entities. It was connection. Genuine, uncomplicated, freely given. It was friendship. And it was, quite possibly, the most revolutionary thing humanity had ever achieved.